UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Well, good evening, and welcome to UAP Crossfire on KGRA DB Radio. Commander Cobra here. On the bottom of the screen, at least on my feed, showing you on the bottom of the screen with two of my three great co-hosts, Chris DiPerno and Dan the Padre Carlson. Chris is up in upstate New York. Dan, the Padre, is holding the fort out in the Dakotas, South Dakota. We have a great show. Don is not joining us tonight, unfortunately, and a little bit sad because I'll be headed out and away from the show for about a month, pretty close to a month by the time I'm able to join everyone back. But really appreciate the great audience interaction, support, emails, contact over the last few weeks. Been a really good effort on the co-host part to get everything together. We've had some very interesting guests, and tonight we will open up this month with a really interesting set of guests, and also joining the pantheon of shows here at KGRA. As always, when I get the lead on the show, because I always forget and we always end up running right up to the end, I would like to put the blessing up front that I always like to give, and it's God's peace that surpasses all knowledge and understanding. And I can tell you, for my two co-hosts that are on the screen, and I'm suspecting that with Don as well, the last couple of weeks have been very challenging for us off the air. There's been a lot going on, and believe me, when you have a great audience, it's a somewhat of a joyful burden that you say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna pack it in and pack it up and get the ruck on and show up for the show and have some good talk and good interaction. So I hope you all appreciate the effort. Sure feel that way from the emails and messages, and always feel free. And while I'm gone, I will attempt from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to join the show. The last time I did that, it didn't work out too well. It was sort of like I was on the moon. Probably would have been easier to transmit from the moon. But I will attempt to dial in and cause some mayhem and trouble. I may not be able to last very long. Put the time.
You mean those great accommodations they give you don't have great Wi-Fi out there? You don't get the luxury hotel that I keep seeing in the pictures of Saudi Arabia?
Not super good. It doesn't seem to work out nearly as well as I would hope. So, Chris, how are you this evening, sir? Welcome. Anything you want to report and bring in?
Yeah, things are actually warm up here in Buffalo, New York. We're having a little bit of the Windy City stuff up here, but other than that, it's not bad.
I've had snow. I've had almost altogether with last three storms, pretty close to 10 inches of snow. That's come and gone. It's back down on the ground, but every day there's been a little something going on.
No, nothing. Guys were out with T-shirts and gym shorts on today out here. I'm telling you, maybe there's something to this global warming. Hope it keeps it up. I can tell you that.
And Padre, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. My voice is a little bit raspy. I guess I've been talking too much today already, but I'm looking forward to a great show tonight. I know we've got some excellent material coming up, so let's go.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring our guests in, please. Well, welcome Jonathan Dover and Stanley Milford, two of the three of the posse that is on the Paranormal Rangers. We are very, very excited to welcome you in to the KGR show. I hear you guys are really kicking off pretty darn good, that things have been pretty exciting. I have actually caught you in the past on some of your other appearances that you have had on the multimedia spectrum out there with some interesting stuff. I think you do some great work. We do share a little bit in common. I was stationed both in Oklahoma and New Mexico and have worked extensively out of those two areas all the way into Nevada, into California. Some of my favorite part of the world is out where you guys are at. And in fact, my wife is headed for Arizona in a couple of days to visit some friends out there. So we do have some terrestrial connection. So welcome. And I think you have met everybody off air before we jumped on. You have one more part of the posse, Michelle Minor, right? She's not going to be able to join us tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. She's traveling. She'll be at a conference in San Francisco this weekend, and
Excellent.
she'll be speaking over there.
So I'll start it out. I'll start with you, John, since you're speaking up. Let's get a quick little background for how you ended up where you are now. You have a very interesting career, and you emulate a couple friends of mine that have similar backgrounds that have ended up doing this kind of work that you're into. So what's your background?
Well, in 1980, I blundered into law enforcement. Didn't know what a Navajo Ranger was, but I applied because I needed a job. They drove me to Window Rock, mostly dirt roads back then. So it was about a 3-hour drive. And the director of the Rangers department asked me one question. What would you do if somebody threatened your life? And I told him, I says, I'll take a 300 Savage and cut their ears off at 200 yards. And he said, you're
I want to work for you guys.
So come to find out that one of the other Rangers that had been hired had been beaten up rather badly and tied up and left with his badge pinned to his rear end. And the other Ranger started his first day, and somebody came up and told him that they were going to kill him and his family. So he loaded up his truck with all his equipment and left it over by the chapter house and quit. So, and then after that, I got a memo that says you're going to attend the police academy for 6 months, and if you don't graduate, you'll be terminated. So managed to stick it out, took all the awards, and I've been at it ever since. Worked with Navajo Rangers, City of Winslow, Arizona Police Department. I was the last ranger to be assigned to the National Park Service for 6 months, and as a law enforcement technician. And I built my own department with historic preservation, doing archaeological crimes for about 9 years.
Amazing.
So, and finished as a lieutenant, about 4,000 hours of training. And I hated to leave, but if I stayed, they would have had to fire 2 other Rangers, and I didn't feel that was right. So,
excellent.
After 31 years, I said goodbye.
Well, I think that's a pretty fair time at the post. Stanley, how about yourself? What's your background?
Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, very well, sir.
Okay, good deal. So I was accepted to the pre-med program at the University of Arizona, and I had started school there, and the director of the Navajo Nation Parks and Recreation section, he contacted me and he said, Stan, we're really needing a ranger for enforcement out of Monument Valley Park and some of the other park areas. He said, would you consider coming back and going to the police academy to become a Navajo Ranger? And you know, as a kid, I had always had a dream to be in law enforcement. And so at that moment the offer was made, I secretly knew that I was going to take him up on that offer, but I kind of played it off, and I said, well, that's a big move. I said, and I'm already, you know, I have a full ride scholarship and ready to go, you know, toward my degree and in the medical field. But so I said, I'll get back to you next week. And the following week, I did give him a call, and I said, yeah, I'll take you up on your offer. And I ended up leaving school there and went back to the Navajo Reservation, and they made the applications for the U.S. Indian Police Academy. Like John, I went to the U.S. Indian Police Academy in Artesia, New Mexico, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or FLETC. I graduated at the top of my class and came back and was commissioned. They gave me a badge and a gun somehow, and that's what began my career there. And later on, very soon after that, John and I were assigned to what was called Special Projects. And we were working the command of our SWAT team for the Rangers, and doing dignitary protection and special investigations. And we were assigned to conduct these investigations of what people refer to as supernatural or paranormal. And so in doing so, that really spanned all of my career, because I went through from being a Ranger recruit to Ranger and then Sergeant, and then at the very end of my career, I served 2.5 years about as the delegated Chief Ranger. So I kind of got to see all aspects of it. And then at the end of that, for about 1.5 years, I served as the senior investigator for the white collar crime unit under Department of Justice for Naval Nations, and total of 30-something years for Naval Nation. So here I am. I'm retired now as of Cinco de Mayo 2023, and I got a contract to write a book 2 months after I retired, and knocked that out in 8 months. Got the book published and came out on October 1st. And so I've been really promoting that book and traveling.
Excellent.
So,
well, we'll definitely put a good spot on it during the show.
Thank you.
So, before I turn it over to my co-host, I have maybe 500,000 questions that I would love to dig in with you guys, but we don't have the time for all my questions tonight solely. But you both appear to have approached this almost like a divine hand kind of brought you into the work. And you took to it very, very quickly. And you both were joined with a Bigfoot kind of activity at one point. In fact, if I remember reading correctly when I was prepping up for the show, that there was actually a complaint that you didn't jump onto a case quite as satisfactorily as somebody must have thought that they supposed to. But it seems to me that there was more at play here than just, you just happened. There seems to be kind of a pathway that brought you both together into this work, and now this next kind of mission that you're this next area that you guys are working in. I'd just like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, for me, what had actually happened, what got us into the paranormal realm, was that in law enforcement, there's no mechanism to investigate anything besides, somebody punched somebody in the nose and or stole somebody's purse and they want it back. So, what happened in our case was that 2 rookie rangers were assigned to take a report from an elderly couple up on the mountain, and they reported that a Bigfoot had stepped over their corral, tucked a sheep under its arm, and stepped back over and walked off with it. So if you knew these 2 rookies, they were young officers. They're always had some kind of a private joke. Both of them were kind of like comedians. And so they would laugh and joke around and, just have these little private jokes going on all the time. Well, Grandma saw that, and she didn't like. She thought they were laughing at her.
Right.
And so she called our chief ranger and chewed him out. And in Navajo culture, when an elder talks to you, you keep your mouth shut and you listen and you take it. Right. And so after he got a tongue lashing, he called a department meeting and he said, from now on, these cases are going to be investigated professionally. Reports are going to be written. And then he turned to me and Stan and says, and you 2 guys are going to get all the major cases. And we just looked at each other and realized at that point that we had been voluntold that we were going to do this. And so we're both, going, wow, I guess we're going to be the X-Files now.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I never want to be insulting to say, but it obviously has a perfect X-Files ring to it. But Stan, let me ask you first. Did you have any interest in this kind of investigation before this was presented to you? I mean, did you have a abiding natural or personal interest?
Growing up, I had a number of experiences that would fall under that umbrella of paranormal. My mother once owned an older home that had been renovated, and there was activity in the home that would definitely be considered spirit activity, plain and simple. And so there was growing up, there was things like that. When later during college, I was out on the reservation and I witnessed firsthand what Navajos refer to as a skinwalker or shapeshifter. Oh. And in doing that and seeing these kind of things with your own eyes, you realize there's more to life here on this planet and more to this universe. Or, later on, John and I determined that this idea of other dimensions, there's something to that. And but I had one really strong case that had to do with animal mutilations. It was 26 head of sheep that were mutilated, and they were slid open from their neck all the way to their groin in a really precise straight line. You often hear in these kind of cases that it looked as though somebody used a laser, and in this particular situation, it did fit that, that they had been cut open like that. There was no blood or entrails or anything throughout the sheep corral. The sheepdogs that went with the sheep wouldn't come anywhere near the corral. There was an really odd petroleum odor, very nauseating. And so that was one of the early cases I had, even before John and I were assigned together. So, but could I ever imagine that him and I would be investigating these kind of cases? And that would have been the last thing that, I thought.
How about you, John?
Well, for me, and this is, I rarely tell this story, but I'm going to tell you guys. Okay. So this will be a first for the podcast thing. Growing up, I had a reoccurring dream. Now, I grew up in Echo Park in Los Angeles, near downtown. And right there on Temple Street, the house is gone now, but just going down the street, there's a park, and it used to be a library there at Glendale Avenue. And in my reoccurring dream when I was young, I mean, I'm talking 7, 8 years old, I went out with my older sister, and we're walking down the street, and there's no traffic, there's no sound. We're just walking down the hill. We cross Glendale Avenue, and on the other side, there's a little park, and there's a baseball field that has no fence around it. And we go up the hill, and there's a saucer sitting there, and it's up on landing gear, and I remember it looks bronze and burnished underneath, like it's little micro scratches everywhere. And that's where my dream ends. Me and her are looking at this open door on the underside with these steps leading up. And so my dream ends there. And I've had that dream for a long, long time. In fact, I became a devotee of 50s science fiction films,
Sure.
trying to look for that particular scene that I may have seen that caused that nightmare. So off we go to 2006, and I'm at home. It's Christmas time. My whole family comes in, and my sister's there, and she starts telling us about a reoccurring dream that she had. And she starts basically verbatim telling my dream. And it got to the point where, we were saying, no, we didn't go that way. We went this way, or we went over here first. And so we started correcting each other. We get to the saucer. And I says, I remember the open door and I remember the steps. And my sister started laughing, and she says, oh, no. She said, and I was about 7 years old then. She says, you ran right into that thing. And I don't remember that. So since then, I've looked up people that do regression hypnosis
Sure.
To find out exactly what happened. And at the time, I was still on a Ranger salary, which is not very much. And they told me, oh yeah, we can do sessions. It'll take you, 6 or 7 sessions to get to the bottom of it. And you'll have to come to Los Angeles, $75 a half hour. And, I can't even afford one session at that price. So
Sure.
I just said, forget it. Yeah, I can live with it. So ever since then, that was my first experience. Don't know what happened. I'd like to find out someday, but and then since then, I've always seen UFOs. I've seen cigars. I've seen discs, triangles, orbs, just you name it. That it's been out there. I've probably seen it, and it got to the point where I started having missing time incidences, and finally I got sick of it, and I got me a dash cam, and I haven't seen a UFO since I put the dash cam in, and I'm good with that. So yeah, there was an interest already.
Well, Dan, let me turn it over to you.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello, Dan.
Good evening.
I'm a pastor up here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and most of my interactions are with Lakota. I've written a couple of science fiction novels that lean heavily on Lakota lore, and I'm wondering, is there any intertribal overlap in terms of the myths and the legends, the kinds of paranormal things? Let's start there. Is there overlap among the Native American community?
From my understanding, and like John had said earlier, that, we have background working in archaeology, and you see some of these cultures that have existed in this country, long before our time, Fremont people and basket maker period. And but from my understanding is that, even like with the Hopi people and the Hopi Reservation, which is located within the boundary of the Navajo Nation, they're two completely distinct cultures, completely different peoples. Their religion and practices are completely independent of that of Navajo and vice versa. And but I know John can speak more to some of the Plains tribes and how there is a kind of overlapping of parts of the culture and stuff. But when it comes to these things like the shape-shifting, Navajos have their version of what's known as the Skinwalker, and up north, you have the Wendigo and other tribes that have information and experiences about shape-shifting being. Where I grew up in Oklahoma as a kid, there was stories of shape-shifting and stuff, but it was quite a bit different from what I knew later on with the Navajo people. So I'm going to let John talk a little bit about it.
Well, and what we've found out is that almost every tribe in the United States has some familiarity with star people that they say have come to them in the past and imparted knowledge. And we're trying to teach them how to live. And the Navajos have the same thing. They call them holy beings or holy people that came to them and told them that, you shouldn't be killing people, you shouldn't be stealing, just all the moral values. And so there's a big, long history of that. And then with the shape-shifting phenomenon, we literally see that all over the world. In Australia and Africa, Philippines, New Zealand, every continent has some version of it. And even amongst different tribes here, there are many different versions of that. So I guess to us, it's not unusual. And what's kind of funny, and we make the statement right up front, is that with Native Americans, we don't need the government to tell us that UFOs are here and, visiting us. We've always known that. And so it's really funny that everybody else is kind of waiting and going, okay, when are they going to admit it? When are they going to make an official statement that UFOs are real?
I completely agree with you, Jonathan.
You mentioned the star people and the shape shifting and how multiple cultures have that. I'm a pastor of a church up here in Belle Fourche, South Dakota. And, in the Bible, we have the story of fallen angels, sky people, if you will, who come and in the book of Enoch, they impart knowledge of various things to people. So that theme is pervasive not only in Native American lore, but also in many others. You mentioned the intercultural creatures, such as the shapeshifter. In India, I believe there's a creature called a Rakshasa, which is a shape-shifting creature that appears typically in the form of someone you trust before it attacks you. So for those of us who are maybe not so familiar with skinwalkers, would you tell us what they are and if there's any danger to people who might find themselves on the reservation? And if so, how do we defend ourselves?
Okay, I'll handle this one. We started speaking about this subject in 2016, and the idea behind speaking about it was not to get people excited and have them go out there and search for them. The idea was to impart knowledge that's really common around the reservation here, but with the caveat that if you ever come out to Navajo land, do not speak about this subject because you will offend many people. Everybody knows about it, but if you go up to a Navajo and say, "Tell me about skinwalkers," you're gonna get them upset because just by speaking about it, you get their attention and they start watching you, and they can. No, I'm just saying I don't mind. I'm protected, but we ran into that thing. And then the other thing is that these entities can actually kill you. And so we have been telling people, don't be out searching for them. We've even told TV crews. We've seen a couple of people that have been poisoned. One of them was sick for a year and a half, and the doctors couldn't determine what was wrong with him. The other one, our friend Haas Lohr, was poisoned by one, and his wife at the time, he was married, and a neighbor carried him out to the truck and put him in. He said he was diarrhea out one side, vomiting out the other, laying in a pool of sweat. And they took him to see a medicine man almost 100 miles away. And the medicine man told him if you had been another 2 hours, he would have died. And proceeded to do a ceremony for him and brought him out of it. So again, the doctors couldn't determine what was wrong with him. So we get very cautious. We will not take people out to look for them or point them in the direction or anything. And, and they can attach to you. We saw one woman who was being terrorized by a pair of them. And she actually moved out of the house. She left all her belongings. She didn't take a thing. She just packed up the car with the kids and took off. She moved to Phoenix, and those entities followed her there. She ended up moving to Colorado. And again, this thing followed her and just terrorized her and her family. And she was desperately asking us for assistance, which we did give her. And as a result, the tribe contacted her and wanted to talk about changing her home site lease to a different location, which is unprecedented. So, yeah, very, very serious stuff, very scary. If you don't know what you're doing, you can get in trouble, or somebody that goes with you can get in trouble.
Jonathan, you remind me of a friend of mine who's done a lot of investigation in Key West, Florida, with, to put it bluntly, evil entities. And he's had a couple hard brushes, but the area that he got himself in trouble was he didn't go through the proper normal routine of preparing himself, putting himself into a spiritually guarded kind of state. In this case, I think he probably followed a more closely, I would say, Christian or near Christian kind of convention on that to protect himself when he was doing this kind of investigation and work. And it seems to me that both of you are speaking from a standpoint of things that you grew up with. So it seems like a family and a background kind of understanding and or tradition and experience that's there. But it seems that you also had to refine this in your adulthood. Is that a correct summation?
Well, one of the things is that this phenomenon is interwoven into basically black witchcraft, and it's a component of that witchcraft, and they go hand in hand, and it's a very ancient process. It's not that a person has to believe in these things for them to appear to these people or affect them. I've had non-natives from Las Vegas witness one of these shape-shifting entities out on one of the long stretches of highway out there, and it occurred just out of the blue. They weren't dabbling in anything, or all of a sudden this thing is running by their vehicle at a highway speed, and the whole family witnessed it. It was very shocking. So it's, again, John and I we give these kind of PSA messages that things like this, things like the Ouija board, these aren't things to be, played with for entertainment. It can be very deadly. It can be very serious stuff. So,
yeah, one of the things that we actually do is we do smudge or smoke ourselves. But if you look at Christianity, the Catholic Church does the same thing.
Sure does.
They have a person walking down the middle of the aisle with the urn, swinging it back and forth on a chain. Recently, scientifically, they found out that the smoke from the cedar, the juniper, or the sweetgrass has a antimicrobial function, that it actually kills microbes. And so it's actually is good for you. But one of the things that everybody gets wrong about it, they ask me, should I start smudging? And my response to most people is, if you are not Native, go back in the history of your people and find out what they did traditionally to ward off evil, and that way it'll have a deeper sense for you when you use it.
Sure.
The most important thing that people get wrong, they go through the motions of smudging, but they don't have an intent that's going to protect them. And the intent that you have is the most important thing. Just like in prayer, you're praying through Jesus, and you have to have an intent. Otherwise, you're just making utterings. And if you just talk, it doesn't do anything. You have to have the intent of what you're praying for or about. So that's what I found. I grew up in a church that would be more closely aligned with Southern Baptists, but it's independent. And the only thing that I really had an issue with, I've even been a deacon in the church, but the only thing I had an issue was that out of all the different cultures, Native Americans are the only culture where you have to throw away your culture to be a Christian. And we found that out. I actually went to a school studying theology for 2 years, and I asked that question a lot, and I was just told, well, that's just the way it is. Even up to 1917, we weren't even citizens of the United States. Yet 14,000 natives went to war in World War I.
Right.
So there is a disparity, and this goes along with this idea of assimilation that get the Indian out of the Indian and teach them how to hoard wealth and do all the other things that Anglo society demands, and create Anglos, and the reservations will eventually go away. And they found out that didn't work.
It's a pretty heartbreaking thing for you to say, but it's an important thing the way you say it. And I'm glad to hear in the religious practices I'm involved in, there's a lot of introspective, straight up discussion about where man's interpretation went wrong with his fellow man on that. And Mrs. Cobra will be excited to hear that you don't think you should be messing around with a Ouija board. It's one of the funny things that is absolutely not allowed here anywhere near us. She does not. It's just something she would never want to have anything messing around with or anybody messing around with. And
we were told that the Ouija board is an unfiltered portal, and
makes a lot of sense.
And there's no guarantees what's going to come out of it. And every Native child that we have spoken to that came up to us after one of our talks told us that the Ouija board basically ruined their lives, and they wish they had never seen it.
They can destroy a Ouija board, though, can't they, Jonathan? I mean, there's a certain ritual to be able to destroy it and then close the portal. I thought they had to burn it. Am I correct on that?
When people utilize an Ouija board, there's a process to open that dimensionally and to close it after that session. And there are people that can use that in a way like a tool to communicate, but it should be left to people that know how to do that. And again, these are being marketed, at the Toys R Us and Walmarts and other places like that. I've seen some little pink versions of it, marketed toward little girls, and it should not be in the hands of little kids. I will say that.
And I agree with you. I wouldn't let one in my house, and I wouldn't let my children play with it or my grandchildren. And that supernatural stuff is one of the most frightening things. First of all, I want to thank you both for your time in law enforcement and your service. I commend you both. I mean, especially where you guys are, because that old saying, one ranger. The Navajo Nation was extremely large. Am I correct on that? It was a vast
27,000 square miles.
Right, and you didn't have that many people to protect it, so you guys were on your own sometimes, with no backup or anything.
Right.
And when we got called, I actually worked at a city called Syracuse that had a Indian reservation adjoined to the city. Was the Iroquois Nation, a city of the Onondaga tribe. I was very fascinated by them because we got to know some of the chiefs, because we were not allowed on the reservation unless we had chief's permission. We couldn't go arrest anybody there unless the chief gave us permission to enter into the reservation. So we got to know them, we talked and stuff. And it was amazing that there were certain things that they would not talk about. We of course, we'd, talk to them, have coffee with them and stuff. And then we say, geez, explain to me what your spiritual leader is or your medicine man. And they say, Chris, no disrespect, but we're not allowed to talk about that. We can't go into that area. And I was one time actually had to go to the longhouse to talk. And I was briefed on how the longhouse operates. And you were exactly right, Stan, when you said you do not interrupt an elder while they're talking. And you just sit there, keep your mouth shut. You don't interrupt until he sits down, and then you can stand up and say your piece. So it was very interesting to learn about that type of culture. But I'm just fascinated by you're doing archaeological crimes. I have never done an archaeological crime. I was a police officer, a detective for 25 years. And when you, John, we talked before on another show, when you guys did archaeological crimes, there were people coming on the reservation trying to take, pieces of pottery or different types of things. How did you go about getting, convictions or arresting these people for these things? I mean, you had such a vast area.
You literally keep your head to the ground, so to speak, and you listen to what the community's telling you, and so you talk to people, which is very unusual for police officers to do. Usually they don't communicate with anybody, but we actually went out and talked to people. And they would tell us, oh, yeah, so-and-so found a pot over here, or, they're selling one over here. Or we saw this vehicle. I mean, at one point, I had a commercial looting going on where a guy would go out and dig on the weekends, and then he'd bring the potteries back, and he'd transport them off the reservation in a commercial vehicle. And he was buddy with the local highway patrol and invited him over to his house all the time. And what happens is that I got word that the highway patrol officer had walked in, and his house looks like a museum with pottery all over the place. And he makes a statement to the guy, you want to be careful about displaying those because those are illegal. And left and didn't do anything. So I had a word with the sergeant that was in charge of that guy, and he got transferred out because, when you're a law enforcement officer, you don't cover up for other people like that.
No.
But these guys, we had, guys that would come out. One would dig, one would watch with a rifle, and the other one would sleep, and they would dig 24 hours like this.
That's amazing. The other thing that I want to bring back too, you two guys are the only ones that probably have evidence of a Bigfoot. You actually were able to collect DNA, a hair sample. Am I right on this? And you sent it to a lab, and it came back of an unknown carnivore. Am I correct on that? Stan?
Yes, you are. Stan?
Can you tell us that Bigfoot story? Because, I mean, nobody's ever gotten evidence like you guys have. I mean, I read about this this story, and it's amazing.
Well, there was, over the course of our career, there was a lot of Bigfoot cases. Some of the cases were more concentrated in some areas than others. You know, at times there was cases where we had up and over 30 people having witnessed this thing, young and old. And so one of the early cases, John and I put together a team that was predominantly SWAT trained personnel. And we went into this theater along the San Juan River where this thing had been seen. And we did photograph and document the tracks left by this thing. And like you had mentioned earlier, at times there were hair samples that were collected and sent off to different laboratories and things like that. So, but there wasn't just one case. I mean, there was numerous cases throughout that entire 27,000 square mile reservation. And one of the things that John and I came to the conclusion is that this idea of other dimensions was a factor in these cases involving paranormal phenomena. I had a haunting case where coins would materialize out of thin air and fall into the floor. And so there was a dimensional aspect to this. And so, yeah.
I got to tell you, if I saw pennies falling out of a portal, I'd be in that squad car doing 90 miles an hour the hell out of that place. I can tell you, I wouldn't even look in my rearview mirror. What's behind me don't count. I'd be out of there. But the amazing thing is that you guys have faced this stuff so many times where a regular police officer, I can tell you in the city, when we get a call about a UFO, you know, lady, oh, there's a UFO in her back. I go back there and say, sorry, ma'am, there's no Martians in your backyard. See you later. Have a good day. You know, kind of a deal. There was no investigation into it. But you guys not only took this dead serious, you handled this like any type of criminal investigation and got results, which it's just amazing to me how professional that was of you guys.
You know, we both had different experiences in our lifetimes, enough to know that these phenomena were happening, that there was some truth behind these kind of things. So when it led to us actually conducting the investigations, we didn't take that approach where, you know, we just thought this person is either under the influence of alcohol or narcotics or even, you know, some type of mental health disorder or emotional health disorder. We would take them seriously. And again, it's part of the culture. I mean, earlier John mentioned the disclosure. Everybody's sitting around waiting for the U.S. government to tell them that these things are real. John and I have witnessed these things on our own, and they do exist. We can't always explain the stuff, but it does happen. And we've seen the objects, you know, and
I think you guys have more credibility than some of the guys in Washington. So if you say they're real, I'm going to take it as real.
Well, and, you know, we witnessed a lot of different things over the years that you can't explain or write off using conventional science. There's an element of spirituality that's involved in all of this stuff that science just right at the very beginning dismisses and don't even consider that, and that's their mistake, because
absolutely
there are elements in this that we just don't know. You look at the vastness of our universe, and especially since the Webb telescope and Hubble telescope, we see the infinite vastness of our universe, and man is not the only species, you know, out here. He's just not. And in some way, these dimensions come in and play a role we mentioned the coins. Well, there was an attachment form to me, and it still happens. I went to an appointment 2 days ago, and as I pulled up and opened the door, a coin fell outside the vehicle, and I witnessed that. And so it still happens. It happens in my house.
Is it pennies, Stan?
No, all
coins.
All U.S. coins. There was only one time when I had a Taiwanese coin that fell on my kitchen counter. I couldn't explain. I didn't have that type of coin in my home, but I still have all the coins. I have a huge Ziploc bag of all these coins. I'll photograph it, date and time it, and it can happen anytime. It happened in Scotland when John and I traveled to Scotland. It happened in Canada, all over the U.S., just out of the blue. I don't have to be thinking about that kind of thing. They all land heads up, though. So and I know out of probability and statistics, that's not going to happen naturally. So I think it's just spirit telling me heads up, I'm around, I'm or be careful, providing some type of warning or omen or something of that nature.
Yeah, we're coming down at the end. Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm sorry. Just letting you know, we're coming down the end of the first block here.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done is we take an evidence-based approach. We don't have a belief, because belief has to do with faith with no evidence. Although Christianity does have a lot of evidence. So what we see is that we use the laws of legal evidence. What could we take to a court and present in front of a judge and a jury? And that's how we look at all these cases.
I think it adds a lot of power to what you've cataloged and what you've described and investigated and presented. So for the folks that are just jumping into the show, we have the Paranormal Rangers with us. They have a show on KGRA on Wednesday evenings, I believe. And if my schedule ever permits, I'll actually catch the show live from time to time and be greatly enjoyed. I am here with the Padre Dan Carlson, Chris DePerno. Don's not with us this evening. This is UAP Crossfire. We're actually going to talk a little bit about interdimensionality and UAPs, and I'm going to be interested to hear Jonathan and Stanley's take on some of the recent activities that have been going on in their area, where they're at right now, in fact, and across the continental United States. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Please join us back on KGRA Radio DB. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. Tonight, Chris DePerno, Dan the Padre Carson, and myself are running the show. Unfortunately, Don is not able to join us tonight. Our special guests, Stanley Milford and Jonathan Delver. They also have a third member of their contingent, their trio. She's not available to make it with us tonight, but hopefully in the future we will see them. They have the show Paranormal Rangers, which is on Wednesday evenings on KGRA, and I think you really need to take the time and get what I consider a very storied, a very well refined and defined approach to the phenomena and the experience that they've lived for a number of years, now are writing books about and putting into practice in a very unique way. Gentlemen, we have had a large run in probably the last, I'd say, 12 months of drone activity, UAP activity. Of course, it captured the nation's attention because what I consider the somewhat misguided media latched onto it during our political expressions that were going on last year into this year. And it acted like what happened in the Northeast was very unique. And I know that you both have seen, heard, been part of a series of investigations between what I consider many to be terrestrial, man-created, and up to some activity level. I mean, I'm sure you have had plenty of brushings with military operations out in your past law enforcement careers. I'd like to think that maybe some of the things you saw was me back when I was in my younger days working out in that part of the world. Generally, though, what I was flying was making a lot of noise and would have been pretty identifiable when we got into areas. What's your take on what the national scene has been? And I suspect from the way that you spoke earlier, and I admire greatly, I like to consider myself in the same frame of mind. I'm not really waiting for the government to tell me what I know. I would be great if they would just fess up and be clean about a lot of things that I think that are going on and stop treating us like children. But what do you see in the current events that have gone on, and compare and contrast a little bit over the years that you spent? This is just one of many facets of your work that you guys were involved in law enforcement, public service, and public safety.
Well, one of the things in the last few years that I worked at the department was that I was the drone operator for our department and for operations, and I knew the ins and outs and capability of these devices, and really, between the commercial and law enforcement drones and what the military utilizes is apples and oranges as far as capabilities. There's stuff that they're using with the military that has extended flight times and can be operated day and night and very effectively. And with a lot of the law enforcement, they're using basically civilian, more or less civilian versions, because one, the costs that are associated with these kind of things, and the availability. I mean, yes, even with the private drones here in the U.S., you were starting to see more and more accessories, night vision capability and thermal capability and things like that, various lighting and audio capabilities with these things. But for me, in what I was seeing reported, at the time of the wave of drones in New Jersey and stuff, it didn't fit what I knew within the law enforcement sector of drones. One thing was the flight times. It exceeded beyond, the capability of the equipment I knew. For me, on certain operations, you were changing batteries out quite frequently,
Sure.
And so on that respect, I think there was a lot, there was stuff that didn't fit in those parameters of that equipment. So I'll let John talk a little bit.
Yeah, what we've seen and understand that culturally, Native Americans have a very low distrust of a real strong distrust of the U.S. military and the government. 6,000 plus treaties that were made since 1492, not one of them was ever kept. So we already know that they don't tell the truth. Now, that being said, when the Phoenix Lights were seen back in 97, immediately afterwards, there was a plane that was diverted over to the gunnery range there, and it dropped flares. And so they said, oh, well, what you saw was flares. But if you looked at the histograms of the color of those lights, they did not match up. The flares actually had smoke trails behind them, and they descended at different speeds. When you see objects close up that don't make a sound, even a drone, there's a whisper of a sound from far away that you can hear. And a lot of times, if you lose sight of that drone, you're out there cupping your ears, going, "Okay, where is it?" And some of them now are designed that if you lose communication, they'll return. But I think that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now are what I call false flag operations, where there is an anomalous phenomenon occurring, and the government sends out things to mimic it and tell people, okay, nothing to see here. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. We got everything under control. Even when they shot down the UAPs, that was a demonstration. Even though later on they found out many of these were weather balloons or just balloons of some sort, spy balloons. The idea behind shooting them down was, look, we can protect our space. And so we're shooting them down to protect you, so don't fear. And, when you think about this idea of extraterrestrials, alien, interdimensional people, we have been trained from a very early age to look at everything with the idea that these are BEMs, bug-eyed monsters, and they're here to take over our world. And every 50s and 60s science fiction movie has the same plot. So, everybody looks at a light and they think, oh, we're being invaded right away.
John and I have had the experience of witnessing objects that far exceeded any type of craft that is known here within the human arsenal. We've seen things that performed in the excess of probably over 10,000 miles an hour. And when you witness that and see that, that there are things that are beyond man's capability and some type of otherworldly objects and craft that are here.
I'd like to ask you a question about that, because that the prevailing theories on where these things are from. You've got the interstellar or interplanetary craft. You have government experimentation. You have interdimensional beings, angels and demons, and the fifth one there is the time travel one. So, of those five main things, which do you gentlemen think is the most likely, or perhaps more than one? I think we could all agree that some things that appear are reported by people are experimental aircraft. So let's set that one aside. Of the others, which do you think is most prevalent?
When you consider that our universe is infinite, the human mind can't really wrap that thought. It's just beyond what the human mind is capable of understanding. If there's a beach in South America that is 75 miles stretching one way and over 75 miles stretching the other way. So if you were to stand there in that middle point, reach down and grasp a handful of sand and brush away all the sand except till one grain is right in the middle of your palm, and then look to either side, and if that sand grain represented Earth, that's what you're looking at as far as our universe. It's beyond comprehension. And so there's probably species and beings that our minds, it's even beyond what John described earlier with the bug-eyed beings that were brought up in the 50s and what science fiction has created. And it's probably beyond what you could ever imagine.
Yeah, as criminal investigators, one of the things that you look at is you get into why things happen, and you look at you don't just report what's seen, but you look at how it happened and why it happened, and in looking at these cases, we started in 2006. We started coming up with our own idea at the time that these things could be interdimensional. We'd track Bigfoot and his tracks disappear in trackable ground, almost like he's jerked up into the sky. We backtrack him and his tracks appear in trackable ground. And we talked to other native tribes in the Pacific Northwest and even back in Toronto, Canada. And they tell us that Bigfoot actually can disappear at will. And we've talked to people that have seen him either fade out very slowly or he just blinked out and disappeared while he was running. And so we started looking at this idea that maybe this idea of dimensions, had something to do with it. String theory proposes that there could be 10 to 12 dimensions or even an infinite number of dimensions. And we saw evidence of a lot of this where UFOs would just pop into being, fly around for a while, and then just fade out and disappear. We were seeing Bigfoot appearing and disappearing in different locations. We were seeing UFOs doing that. We were seeing we started wondering if the skinwalkers were actually able to tap into this other dimension. And a lot of people look at dimensions and they think that they're these solid walls next to each other that you go through. But and we even looked at the creation story of the Navajo, how they came through different holes in the sky and came into a new world. So it was the only thing that really fit. I personally believe that these dimensions are almost like a cloud that, goes together. And apparently sometimes these portals can open up randomly. And there are other places where these portals may be fixed in location. And so we started saying that might be the answer to what we're seeing, is that these things, even the coins that were appearing, ported through a dimensional gate. And then we have the Hadron Collider, the large collider that did an experiment to open a dimensional gate and send a message through, which I've always thought was a bad idea. Because in the military, they always say never draw fire on your own position. So, that being said, we've got a multi-billion-dollar facility trying to open a dimensional gate. So it kind of stands to reason that this stuff could be interdimensional in some way. Angels and demons, again, you're putting that into a construct of religion. And, I get it. I've studied the doctrine of demons and the doctrine of angels and all that different stuff. So, I know all about that. I actually prefer to use the term positive energy and negative energy because it describes the same thing, but it gets people's attention more, and it doesn't have the religious overtones that can, as you know, when you start talking about religion, immediately people put up the guard and say, I don't want to hear it. And so this is just our method of getting the information out in a way that's palatable for everybody to receive it.
I'd like to follow up question to that. You say you see the tracks, trackable ground. They appear and they disappear, which would imply portal existence or the opening of doorways to other dimensions. Do you think that, getting back to what you said initially in your answer, to look for why these happens, do you think this activity is intentional, or are these haphazard random openings where things intersect? And to that end, there are about 500,000 cases of people in the U.S. disappearing without a trace every year. Have you investigated cases of people disappearing without a trace and then reappearing and saying where they've been?
We have not, but we both had long discussions with David Pilates on his Missing 411 theories, and his latest film is Missing 411, The UFO Connection. And we talked extensively about this idea of dimensional gates. They had a gentleman that disappeared up in Mesa Verde. They had a massive search for him. They couldn't find him. The next day, all the Rangers were somewhere else, and somebody went over there and they heard somebody crying for help from down in one of the ruin areas. And they notified the staff, and they got all the Rangers back over there, and they searched that area again, but they couldn't find anything. So, there is the possibility that these dimensional gates do open up. A military contingent actually went into Chaco Canyon back in 1977, I believe, and they were up the canyon from Chaco Canyon by several miles, and at 1 o'clock in the morning they saw a rippling in the star field, like if you had thrown a stone into the water and the ripples just went out. And they said that thing lasted for a good 10 minutes. And the participants later said that they felt they were looking at a dimensional gate that had opened. Now, the Navajos, when they talk about coming through several different worlds, in two of those worlds, they came through a hole in the sky. And in one, they actually had to put some kind of a construct up to climb through. And they ended up in this world that they call the Shining World. So, the spiral design is known to be a sign of migration. And you see that all over the United States with different tribes using these spiral symbols. And we're thinking that migration through dimensional gates might just be something that is just a different interpretation of migration.
Gentlemen, I like to... I'm sorry, go ahead. No, okay. Gentlemen, I'd like to ask you something that you had talked about. First of all, I want to say that trying to open a portal is a testament to the stupidity of man if you don't know what you're doing. So, I mean, let's face it, you don't want to open up something unless you know what's on the other side. But that being said, have you guys ever... I will tell you, very rarely do I talk about this, but I had a murder case where I was interviewing the suspect, and as the suspect, he denied, and we were going back and forth talking, and then all of a sudden his whole demeanor changed, and I tell you to this day, as he was confessing, his eyes turned black. And they found me dry heaving in the bathroom because I thought, oh my God, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. Have you guys ever faced something that you said, this is pure evil here? I mean, you talked about skinwalkers and different things, but I mean, on holy ground there, which I consider the reservation, you must have faced something that you said, man, oh man, I'm in the thick of it now.
For me, during my college years, I witnessed one of these shapeshifters or skinwalkers on the Navajo reservation. And what I witnessed was what appeared very similar to a modern day greyhound, but this was the back of it was much taller. It was running on all fours. It was white in color from head to toe. It kept up with me at highway speed. And so its eyes were as though they were self-illuminated, like when you go to the movie theater and you have these orange exit signs up above the doors. That's the color of this thing's eyes, and it was within 2 feet of the passenger side of the car I was driving. This thing had a long snout. It had a mouthful of teeth and jagged, sharpened teeth. And for me, in that instance, that was what I recognized about this thing, was that it was evil, that it was the epitome of negative energy, and it wanted to do me harm.
Yeah, but Stanley, how do you face that? I mean, you're looking at that straight up, and
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Well, for me, at the time of operating the vehicle, I slid down in the driver's seat till I could barely see over the dash. I didn't look at my rear view mirrors. I didn't look back at it. I don't know what the hell this thing did at that point. I did come racing into the driveway at my dad's house and jumped out and ran in, and he asked me, what had happened or what. And I explained to him, and that's when he told me that's what it was. It was a skinwalker in its animal form. And it's, so, but that moment I got the sense of something evil, something negative. There's other times I did haunting investigations where we were using frequency scanning equipment that would repeatedly stop on the number 666, and repeatedly, and it's scanning thousands of frequencies, within a few seconds, and it would stop and lock on that number. And so there were times that I got that sense that there was this connection to what people refer to as evil, or something of that nature.
John, what about you?
Well, I've investigated more than my fair share of homicides when I was at Winslow, and I've seen some people that, you look at them and you think, wow,
they're possessed.
I
really thought this guy was.
That would be the word. And recently I ran into a situation where somebody looked like they were having a seizure, and but the seizure went on for over a half hour, and we got the feeling later, we talked amongst ourselves, that person may have been possessed by a demon, or something negative, to actually have that happen.
Yeah, because you can't go out to your captain. You can't go out to your captain and say, "Hey, you got to call in a priest for this guy," because I need a cross or holy water or something to deal with that type of stuff. But I don't know, just there, because you're so alone out there in a vast wilderness. City, I can call backup or stuff like that, but you're on your own and facing the supernatural things. I mean, what do you use for protection? I mean, as far as that goes, there's some ritual. Marianne Robb, who's a friend of yours and a friend of mine, said that every time she went on the reservation, there was some ritual that you had to perform with her or something to protect her.
Yeah,
First and foremost, John and I have always had an extremely strong spirituality and faith in the Creator, and so I mean, even as a child, so a lot of that over the years, any of these things that were where there was a dangerous, or potential for danger or hazards, a lot of times, John and I would simply, working SWAT. I mean, there's times we're being shot at.
Oh, yeah.
You just stay focused on your training and on the mission that you have, and you put your safety and your spirituality in the hands of your Creator, and He can handle all of that stuff, whether it's demonic or, I mean, if you look at the movie The Exorcist, that's based on an actual case, a real case that these clergy dealt with, in dealing with a little child. And so I think we see more demonic possession than, what is accepted. These mass shootings. I think a lot of that stuff is simply demonic possession, because afterward people will say, he was the nicest person all his life, and he never did this or that, or she didn't, and all of a sudden, whether they have somehow opened up something, whether through a Ouija board or other things, other means, to become possessed. I don't know.
John? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John, please.
Yeah, we there's so much. One of the things that we do not do is we don't respond to anything with fear. When you respond with fear, that's an emotion, and that emotion can cause you to miss things that you might want to observe and record. So, we've actually had producers ask us, well, if we film you, can you act like you're scared? And we told them it's not in our book. We don't do that. And if you went on an investigation with us, it'd probably be pretty boring. We do protect ourselves. We pray. We smudge. There are certain medicines that we take, like bitter medicine and lightning struck tree medicine, to help with all that. But we always have an intent about protecting ourselves. And so if your heart and mind isn't in the right place, you can get yourself in trouble. And we walk into these situations a lot of times it looks like we're fearless, but afterwards we'll finish and we'll walk away and go, wow, I don't know how I made it through that. But we do the job, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. And we're there to actually, I know it's unusual in police work, but we're actually there to help people. And, I know in today's world, that's kind of a misnomer, that doesn't happen all the time. But that was our purpose, was to help people and listen to them and let them know somebody cared out there.
In the archaeological enforcement, you were in the environment where, there's human remains within these ruin sites, and you're going into that, doing your work, investigation and things. And we were taught, you can go into those places, but you have to have the utmost respect of those individuals that have come and gone, that have lived there, children and elderly and people of all ages, but you go into it with respect. And that's where a lot of people run into problems, even with these haunting investigations. They go into it haphazardly or looking for a ghost experience. Yeah, provoking. Yeah. And
for all the wrong reasons. I mean,
you're asking for trouble by doing that,
Well, I mean, you present a lot of information that people would say is entertainment. People watch this program tonight, yours, from an entertainment point, and that's wonderful. If that's, I don't mean it in the negative sense that generates, but there's a lot of that is negatively based, because it has no service to your fellow man, has no service to a greater cause, an ultimate being. And I think that's where you both rapidly have separated yourselves from many people. I mean, the story itself is good enough without the Hollywood. If you're following along with my conjecture here, that's where we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. How many times have you read based on a true story?
Right.
And when you talk to someone, a lot of this falls under the entertainment umbrella. But
say again. Sorry, Stan. Say again.
a lot of this stuff that deals with paranormal, supernatural, and these investigations, it is by default being placed under the entertainment umbrella. But John and I didn't get into this stuff to be entertainers, and we got in this to share the information really from a public service standpoint, that this stuff does happen. It's not always make believe. It's not always hoaxing and faking. And again, John and I have witnessed things with our own eyes. The coins, I've seen these damn coins materialize with my own eyes repeatedly, fall out of thin air. Well, those coins had to come from somewhere. They had to originate from a starting point to fall in the floor or wherever. Sure. And so, when we talk about dimensions, that's what fits.
My basis of my remarks are this. If maybe I can capture it. You are telling a truth. You're telling an experience. You've investigated other people's experiences that obviously led to some kind of trouble. And it's not presented, it's presented very neutrally, very openly, that here you go. And it's there for the person to study, think about, accept, or walk away from. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, I think what compels a lot of people with a lot of interest is that, you're not easily, either one of you are not easily shakeable, and you're consistent. You just don't, this is what's happened. This is what we're doing now. And I think that's what's really kind of refreshing on the part. Now, last week, and it would be great to put you in the room with who I'm going to mention. Stan Gordon was on our show, a longtime friend of myself, Chris, as well as Don Ecker, and has recently become a friend of the Padre. He has had probably one of the longest careers of investigating the UFO, primarily that phenomena, in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia. That's where he's from. He's done it for many, many years, had a network of people. And one of the things, he has a very similar conclusion and experience with interdimensionality being kind of the fabric that explains a lot of the things, or at least ties a lot of the things together, that makes it somewhat cognitively, you're able to at least analyze it and come up with some kind of process that's happening. So it'd be really fun to have you all in the room together and just poke you with some questions. But he has had numerous Bigfoot, Yeti things occur around the same time that UFO activity is reported, or UAP type activity is reported. And I'd like to get your take, both of you, your take on why that connection is there. Or do you see a connection, or do you just think it's just one more fold, in this experience?
Yeah, we saw early on, a connection to this. And what we saw, when you start receiving reports and you get people talking to you and you listen, a lot of people don't listen. You have to listen. And what we started seeing was correlations when there were more UFO reports being given to us. We saw a correlation that there was more Bigfoot reports coming out, and vice versa. And so we just noted that there were flaps of UFO activity. Sometimes there'd be nothing. And then all of a sudden it would pop up and you'd see more and more of it. We even had one case where a UFO was circling a location and little aliens were running around the ground and a Bigfoot showed up with them. So, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on, but we definitely saw some links.
How do they interact? So you've got the smaller aliens, and then you've got a Bigfoot that runs into the scene. Did they acknowledge one another? Did they interact at all?
The people said that the little aliens, they look like little demons or little monsters, about maybe 2.5, 3 feet tall. They were running all over the place, over the roofs and everything else. And they said the Bigfoot showed up at the door and started pushing on it. And I can only imagine this Hollywood scene with the door, bulging out. But they said that they could sense that it was pushing on the front door, trying to get in. And then one of the family there opened up with a rifle and started shooting. And they said that he said later on that he had hit one of them. And so yeah, there's that was the only case where we really saw both together. But other than that, we just saw the correlation in reports being made.
One of the things that, over the course of years I investigated, I myself could not follow this idea that these things were inhabiting our forests, like mountain lions and bears and cougars, bobcats. There just wasn't the evidence of that. At times John and I on different operations were living in the woods for weeks at a time, and but we didn't see that evidence of that. I know there's some researchers that they propose that these things are they're migratory, and but given what we currently have with the capabilities with satellite imagery and stuff like that, we would have clear evidence that these things are living in the woods, and it's not there. I tend to think that these things are more like a drone, that they are being placed here by other entities in our environment for whatever reason, either to collect data and information while they're here on this planet. They're built like almost always described built like a tank. If you put this thing anywhere here on Earth, whether it's out here in Arizona or up in the Himalayas, or it could survive that, and even to the point of fending off even probably the largest bear. It could actually defend itself. Whereas if you had a little gray alien that was running around out here where I live right now, these little gray aliens would probably freeze to death overnight, and if they were exposed in the environment. So I tend to follow that line of thought that they're being placed here for whatever reason and then withdrawn back to wherever they were, whether it's a craft or dimensional gate or whatever.
I got to jump in and say this is an ode to Bill Skywatcher, our producer. Many years back, this one of our previous shows here and other times we spoke, this seems to me, and you two are probably the best I will have as a source to cite this. There was a $6 million man. Please hang with me. I know this is going to sound silly when I first bring it up, but in this episode of the $6 million man, he engages and he meets aliens, and the aliens use for their gathering of information and interaction outside their ship or however it was set up. I forgot the exact setup. The Sasquatch, Bigfoot mythology that they had learned from native people, and that's what they were using. Now, in this particular iteration, it wasn't a living, breathing entity. It was a robotic, well, as you said, Stan, a drone, but done in a terrestrial type presentation of some kind of an entity. And right. I remember one time I brought this up before, and Bill actually threw the pitch. He knew where I was going with this years back, but it does. You touched upon because I spent a lot of time doing reconnaissance work. That was one of the things I spent a lot of time in the military, tactically doing in this world of ISR. And the technology we have now, I may not have seen you walking along, let's say, a pipeline, but I'll find your footprints.
Yeah.
And then once I know I have that activity, I can set up enough things from aircraft, let alone what I can drop onto the ground, just to give me the general pattern of what's happening. And then when you have that, we have the technology now without even going close up to it. You can start to figure out physical size, the weight of how you press things down in that. And that can be done very far remote away. And we're not getting that. And we've never had anyone come in with the carcass. I mean, people find things all the time. They find skeletal remains of animals, even as rapidly as things break down. We don't have those kinds of activities.
30 years ago, our government had the ability to read the letters on a license plate, from satellite.
Right.
So we had the technology 30 years ago, and it's only advanced, every year since then. So there would be clear evidence of these things wandering around on our planet. If, we worked with wildlife, we seen, where there was the monitoring of wildlife, and we just didn't see the evidence that these things were inhabiting the forests or migrating through there.
But in ancient Lakota lore, they regarded the Bigfoot, I think that the term they used for him was Big Brother in the Lakota language, as just this thing that lived in the wilderness. And they actually said if you were blessed enough to have an interaction, it was a good omen for you. They regarded it as a creature. We have discussed on this broadcast a couple of times in the past that maybe there's a couple of different things going on. There seems to be this big, hairy, erect walking ape that has 5 toes, 5 fingers, and is just an erect primate. And then there's this other thing that has 3 toes, and when it's encountered, it has glowing red eyes and is more belligerent. Did you encounter both of those types in your investigations?
I'll let John talk a little bit about this idea of different amounts of toes, in relation to the pictographs and petroglyphs and stuff like that, if he would elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, in archaeological work, I've had the opportunity to go to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of petroglyph and pictograph sites. And in them, you see creatures that a lot of times have 3 toes and 3 fingers. And you see that, when you look at these carvings in the rock where they're pecked out, it takes a lot of effort to do this. It's not just, take a power tool and go and draw a picture. They're out there pecking at it over a long, long period of time. And I've tried to actually take some of that material and do something, with modern tools, and even that's difficult. So you have this situation where they're putting these things up, and they were actually recording historical facts, things that they have had contact with. I always pick on the Hopi because they're just right 40 minutes north of me. They have kachinas. And those kachinas, if you ever plan on collecting kachinas, you better start soon, because there's anywhere from 250 to 350 separate kachinas. And if you look at the historical aspect of it, they were depicting gods that they had met. and basically created a figure of them, of what they had seen. Now, if you go along with the idea that maybe they were able to access dimensional gates on their own, it would have been the priests within the tribe that were able to do this. And, if you had 1,000 years to explore infinite number of dimensions, you might come back with 250 to 350 separate entities that you looked at. Now, when the Spanish came, one of the first things they did was that they killed off all the religious leaders belonging to the tribe. That's just something they did. And then they destroyed the kivas and they built the Catholic Church right over the top of it, where it used to be, as a way of saying our God is so great that he defeated your religion. And so I think this information was lost. I actually had the opportunity to talk to Travis up there at Skinwalker Ranch. And I mentioned to him that if he asked him if he was familiar with Nikola Tesla. And I love doing the imitation of him. He says, well, I did my thesis on Nikola Tesla. And, he actually recreated some of his experiments. And so I told him 369 theory that Tesla used. He said that if you knew the secrets of the numbers 3, 6, and 9, you could do anything. And he said that, 3 represents energy, 6 represents frequency, 9 represents vibration. And so I told them up there, I says, you guys have energy. You don't know what it is. You think it's a battery, but I think it's a capacitor, that it can store energy and then under certain circumstances release it suddenly and people get injured. I says, you have frequency, the 1.6 gigahertz that you keep seeing. I says, but you don't have the vibration or the amplitude of that frequency. And so if you had the vibration, you might be able to open that gate. And they did some experiments with it, and some really unique things popped out while they were doing these experiments. And, so anyway, they like to say that I came up with that idea, but that was Tesla's idea. Wow. He was so enamored with those numbers that he would not stay. His room had to be divisible, the number of his room. He would get to work in New York and walk around a New York City block 3 times before he entered the building. And, I look at that and think, wow, So, and all this time we haven't seen anything that turns, we're always looking for answers. And if we find a better answer, then we're going to head that direction. But we haven't seen anything yet that tells us that we're on the wrong course with this idea of dimensions.
Arizona has some amazing UFO cases down there. I remember a case I was briefed on. It was either on the reservation or just toward the reservation, where the orbs. Now, apparently, orbs are very famous down in Arizona. There's a lot of orb sightings down there. And this one orb was following this car. And they tried to get away from it, but the orb was following it. But here's the amazing thing. Somehow or another, the car, after they, the next day, the one side of the car where the orb was stationed on, following it, was all magnetized. The complete side of the car was magnetized. And were you guys part of this investigation? Because I think somebody took a sample of the oil from within the car, and the oil was altered. Yeah,
that
you're
was
shaking your head, Stan. So I'm on the right course. You guys investigated this, right?
Well, I did, John. That particular case, she was followed by this orb, and it flew along the side of her vehicle. And we were in contact with Chuck Modlin, who was a STAR team member for MUFON, and he was a physicist. Had worked in Sandia and Lawrence Livermore and White Sands, and he told me, he says, walk around the car with a compass and see if there's any magnetic anomalies. Well, there were two of them. One was just behind the driver's door, and the other one was in front of the passenger door on the fender. And if you drew a line between those two, it went right through the driver. The analysis of the oil, he said to pull the oil filter, so we did, and it got sent into a lab. And it came out with a high level of sodium nitrite. And they said sodium nitrite is not a normal part of the
oil composition.
The oil filter or the oil itself. And they couldn't account. That particular car started having problems. Alternator went out, the water pump went out, the battery died, the computer was having problems, and it got taken back in and traded under the Lemon Law. So
was there an animal
interdimensional lemon law, I guess?
Yeah.
How do you explain that lemon law that a UFO caused this?
All they said was, I'm having problems with it, too many problems with this car, and that was that. So,
was there a rabbit involved with this, John? Giant rabbit, right?
Right. The story as portrayed in the TV show doesn't show that. But when the young lady got home, she pulled up to where she parks, and there was a 3.5 to 4 foot tall rabbit sitting, like you would see a cat sitting up. And she said that the ears were together and they were back on the head, angled and straight back. And she said it had black eyes. It didn't blink. It was almost like a brown and black peppered color. So these colors, this girl knows the difference between a jackrabbit and a cottontail. Yeah. And so she just sat there. And the first thing she utters is, "Oh, I'm on to you, rabbit." And then she called her brother and she says, "I'm going to make a dash for the door. And if you lose me for any reason, call help." And he was in Phoenix. So she backed up, got out of the car, started backing up, slammed the door and ran around the back of the car, made it inside, locked the doors, and didn't sleep the rest of the night.
Sure.
The next day she had a incredible migraine headache, and she had never experienced a migraine in her life. And ever since then, she's got migraines every now and then because I know who she is and talk to her every now and then. So it's definitely a close encounter. And there was actual physical evidence that rabbit had been there because the ground, which is hard caliche clay that's dried and baked, it's almost like ceramic. And you'd have to kick at it with a boot to break the surface. And there were marks on the ground where the surface had been broken, where that thing had been sitting.
But were there any rabbit droppings? Because, you got to know that when a rabbit is in an area, it's going to leave droppings. Were there any of those?
A 4 foot rabbit, Padre?
Yeah, there were no there were no droppings, but what the STAR team told me was that this could have been what they classify as a screenshot memory.
Right.
That what you're seeing is so terrifying that if you actually saw it for what it was, you would be screaming. And so they put something in your mind and give you a screenshot of something that is not going to hurt you. It could be an owl, it could be a deer, it could be a large butterfly, anything like that, as opposed to what you're actually seeing.
I have to jump in, gentlemen, because we're at the end of the show, because it's always a good show when we fly right up to the last minute. Your description reminds me of a description that a Native American in this part of New England explained to me is the basis for spirit animal being revealed to you if you get into the proper state. So we have to pick it up on the next time we're together, because we can't just do this once. We didn't scratch the surface. Jonathan Dover, who has a book, he's working on a book coming out. Stanley Milford, who has a book out on his Paranormal Ranger experiences, and I hear he's working on a second one. Our two guests are also part of a trio that is on Wednesday nights in KGRA, the Paranormal Rangers. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And to Dan and to Chris and to Don, who didn't make it out tonight, Godspeed and everything that you guys do. And wish me luck, and I'll try to talk to you from the desert when I head out there for the work. But it was great working with you all tonight. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Thank you, Bill.
Greatest audience on the planet. Thank you.